Honestly, I just think the Red Sox couldn't get the job done here. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Seat Radio. My name is Corbin. I got to assume that the Boston Red Sox are real happy to be done with Cleveland for the rest of the year. After dropping 3 out of 4 in their first series meeting of the season, they just lost 2 out of 3 in Cleveland. That officially puts the Red Sox at 14-12 on the year. Still good for third in the AL East and a half game out of a wild card spot in the AL. But man, this series really just felt like a case of not being able to get the job done. So what we are going to do in today's video is we're going to break this series down. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and of course, how all of this impacts the 2024 season. But before we get into that, make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. Just helps these videos out a ton, and it would mean a lot to me. Don't forget, all these episodes are now available on the go, whether you listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Pocket Casts. You can get Red Seat Radio in podcast form anywhere you listen to podcasts. Link will be in the description down below, or you can head over to your favorite podcast listening place and just search Red Seat Radio. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's start by breaking down the offense first, because to be honest with you, this is really where I'm talking about not being able to get the job done. Although I will say, there were some absolutely fantastic performances in this series offensively. Wilyer Abreu went 5 for 12 in this series with 2 doubles and a home run with 3 RBIs. He has stepped up in maybe the biggest way possible for the Boston Red Sox lately. I remember 2 weeks ago, we were saying he just looks lost on this team. Well, now he has the 3rd highest OPS plus on the team at 156. Just an absolutely massive turnaround for a guy that we really needed to see a turnaround from. Hopefully this will continue because the Red Sox really need it. And speaking of top performers, Connor Wong is currently the Red Sox second best hitter right now. He had a multi-home run game in the second game of this series on a 4-for-4 day. Just incredible production right now from Connor Wong. He's up to an astounding 188 OPS plus and has the 3rd most home runs on the team, just behind Tyler O'Neill and Tristan Casas, RIP. Rafael Devers is back in action and looks absolutely fantastic. He had 6 hits and 9 plate appearances, including a home run and a double. This lineup just looks so much better with Rafael Devers in it. Obviously, Corbin, right? But to see him healthy and good to go is so encouraging. He started this series hitting 188 with a 375 slug and came out of it hitting 263 with a 491 slug. You can't really ask for much more than that, and it just really adds an entire new dynamic to this offense, which we obviously knew about before, but it's just so refreshing to see. Rob Refsnyder continues to be a fantastic bat. In 2 games, he had 5 hits in 8 at-bats, including a double and a triple. He just continues to put together really great ABs, and it's really hard to argue with anything he's doing at the plate right now and why he's starting at basically every game, even though there are some against righties. So like I said, overall, there were some really great individual performances in this one, but there is some negatives to talk about as well, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that the Red Sox just simply could not take advantage of runners in scoring position. In this series, they were just 4 for 23 with runners in scoring position and left 20 men on base. That's a 174 average with runners in scoring position. That's just simply not good enough production to get the job done. And what I think is a massive part of this is that the top half of your order is getting on base, right? We just talked about a ton of different players, and a lot of those guys were either in the top half of your order or dead in the middle. They're getting on base. The problem is the bottom half of your order just isn't getting guys in. Between 7, 8, and 9, you're looking at Bobby Dahlbeck, who's under 1 in terms of his average. You're looking at, say, Don Rafaela, who did have some fairly decent moments in this one, but overall is hitting below 200. And you got guys like Emmanuel Valdez or David Hamilton who are also hitting under 100 right now, and it's just not a recipe for success when you're having such production from the top half of your order and then just basically going 1, 2, 3 in the bottom half. That's just not going to get the job done, and that's what we saw in this series. And the Red Sox really had a lot of opportunities to take this one home and just simply couldn't get runs across the plate. So definitely something to pay attention to, but again, there's also a lot of good in this series to pay attention to as well. From the pitching side of things, there really aren't many starters left to talk about in these series, but one that is still here is Tanner Houck, and he gave another really solid start against the Guardians in this one, going 6 innings, allowing 2 runs on 5 hits, striking out 4 and walking 3. The big thing that jumps off the page immediately at you is that walk rate, just because he's been excellent at preventing walks this year, but he was pitching in a super gloomy, rainy day that could have a big thing to do with it, obviously, right? Ball's a little bit wet. It's probably not going to be as easy to spin it throughout all the zones. So I'm going to chalk that up to the weather. We'll see if it becomes a trend, it'll become more of a concern. But for right now, I'm not really worried about it because Tanner Houck still gave you 6 innings of 2-run baseball, and that's really all you can ask for him at this point in the year. He still continues to be one of the biggest highlights on the current Boston Red Sox, which was absolutely necessary from Tanner Houck with all the injuries going on. He continues to go out there and basically save the bullpen. And speaking of needed with injuries, shout out to Cooper Criswell. He went out there in the second game and dropped 5 scoreless innings, allowing just 3 hits, no walks, and striking out 3. I said this in our live stream this week, but I truly think Cooper Criswell just reminds me of a right-handed Rich Hill. There are going to be times where he absolutely deals. It's never going to be anything super overwhelming, but he's going to be a really tough guy to score against. And then there are going to be days or starts where he just doesn't have it and he gets absolutely rocked, and it's going to average out to a pretty solid pitcher, which again is something the Red Sox could really desperately use. Cooper Criswell really showed up for this moment. Chase Anderson, on the other hand, did not. He was only able to make it through 1 2/3 innings, allowing 5 earned runs on 3 hits, striking out no one, and walking 3. I really think the walks just sort of killed him in this outing, giving guys, especially a team like the Cleveland Guardians, who are known to scrap together runs, all these free passes were eventually going to come back and bite you, and that's exactly what happened in this game. I will say, I did think that at some point this rotation was going to crack a bit due to the weight it was under, having 3 of their starters on the IL. It just sort of sucks it was in this Chase Anderson start. I don't think anyone really expected anything crazy from him, but 5 runs in an inning and 2/3 just isn't going to get the job done. And I will say, it's going to be really interesting to see how the Red Sox navigate not having basically any starters outside of Tanner Houck and Cutter Crawford over the next couple of weeks. There is some good news on that front, though. Nick Pivetta is getting closer to a rehab assignment. He should be back and with this team within the next week or so, I would say. And then Garrett Whitlock's making some positive strides towards coming back as well. So you are getting reinforcements in the coming weeks, but it is going to be a little bit difficult for Alex Cora to navigate these next few games or series, right? You're going to have to get really creative with how you get through these games, and having a guy like Chase Anderson go out there and give you an inning and 2/3 just isn't how it's going to work out well. Although I will say that start really wasn't helped any by the errors behind him. Reese McGuire had 2 in that game. It didn't really change the outcome of the game all that much. It certainly didn't help as well. The defense has been much better, especially during this entire road trip, than we've basically seen since Trevor Story went down. I think a large part is due to the fact that Ceddanne Rafaela has basically permanently taken over the shortstop position. Alex Cora yesterday announced that Ceddanne Rafaela is his starting shortstop going forward. Good, that is the correct move. We really found out over these last couple of weeks that the shortstop position really sort of ties this team together. Having a solid shortstop improves the defense not only at the shortstop position, but on the entire infield as well, and it also allows the outfield to be better somehow. I'm not really sure how that works, but they are looking a lot better, especially Wilyer Abreu and Jarren Duran, both of them being one of your better statistical defenders on this team. So it was great to see the defense do what it did over this road trip, but again, these errors, they just keep killing this team, and it's certainly not going to help, especially when you don't have a ton of help in the rotation right now. As for the bullpen, I would say they're pretty solid. There wasn't any earned runs outside of just Cam Boozer, who allowed 2 in the first game. I think he's just still trying to get his feet under him at the major league level. We'll see how he develops over the next coming weeks. He's got some opportunities here with the lack of starters in this rotation to really get some meaningful innings. Outside of that, the only other person to have a run cross the board was Chris Martin. It was an unearned run because of a Reese McGuire error. It was his second of the game, so we're not going to really count it against him, but I will say Chris Martin's still looking a bit shaky out there a little bit. Not looking like the Chris Martin that we saw in 2023. He's much more human. He's much more hittable, and that could be a bit of an issue for the Red Sox going forward. Maybe he's just a guy who needs to be out there in the 8th inning, because every time he comes into the 7th, he doesn't look as good as when he comes out in the 8th. Outside of that, again, no one else gave up a single earned run in this series, and I will say, shout out to Joely Rodriguez, who looked much better in this series than he's looked basically the entire year, so you got to give credit where credit is due. But again, overall, a really solid performance for the bullpen. Overall, when we're looking at this series as a whole, this was a really strange series for me, because at the same time, it felt like the Red Sox both deserved to lose this series and win it at the exact same time. You look at the last game specifically, it makes sense that the Red Sox gave up a ton of runs to a team that's on fire, the best record in Major League Baseball, when you don't have 2/3 of your rotation. But at the same time too, you had the opportunity to win that game. You had bases loaded at one point, couldn't get the job done with one out. You had runners in scoring position basically the entire game and just couldn't get them across the plate enough to win that game, and you simply couldn't get the job done there. You look at the first game that they lost in this series, you got the pitching that you needed from Tanner Houck, but you look dead against the starting pitcher in the Cleveland Guardians, Ben Lively, that you probably shouldn't have looked dead against. It's just sort of one of those series where, yeah, you probably should have lost it, but you also probably should have won it as well. It was a really weird one for me, but I will say there was a lot to be encouraged about in this series. You talk about the offense, and yeah, they couldn't get the job done with runners in scoring position, but you're starting to see guys, one, come back and look healthy, but two, put it together at the plate a little bit, start being more productive with their at-bats, and that's a really encouraging sign. We talked about the defense, right? The defense, despite the 2 errors in the last game, overall looked much better than it has over the entire year as a whole, and had some really big moments. There were times in these games where they essentially at the time saved the game because of their defense, and that's the first time we could say that in a while. And you got to hand it to the pitching, right? Despite the fact that Chase Anderson had that tough outing, everyone else did their job despite all the injuries that are plaguing the Boston Red Sox. So you look at this series, and yeah, they lost, and yeah, it sucks, but they still end the road trip 4-2, which is a positive record. They still end up in third place, which is positive. They're still fighting for a playoff spot, which is positive. So I don't really know how to feel about this one. Yes, the Red Sox couldn't get the job done, but there's a lot to be encouraged about. I think there are some really good signs that the Red Sox are going to continue to play like this going forward, and that's going to lead to more wins eventually. So yeah, it sucks they lost this series, but I'm still really encouraged by what we saw. However, that's just my opinion, so let me know in the comment section down below, what did you think of this series? What did you think of the Red Sox not being able to get the job done against the Cleveland Guardians? Were there positive takeaways that you saw that I didn't mention? Were there anything negative that you saw that I didn't mention? Let me know all your thoughts on the latest Red Sox series in the comment section down below. As always, if you made it to the end of this video, don't forget, make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button as well as that like button as well. You made it to the end here, you might as well do both. It helps it out a ton. It would mean a lot to me. And don't forget, going forward, we are also available everywhere you get podcasts. Link are either in the description, or you can look Red Seat Radio up on your favorite podcasting app. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you in the Red Seats.